What kind of love clings even after death? The kind that makes a queen sleep beside her lover's severed head, preserved in a glass jar, floating in yellowed spirits like a macabre keepsake. That is the legend whispered through the corridors of Russian history, a tale so grotesque it sounds impossible, yet the details refuse to die. This is not a fairy tale of passion and tragedy. This is a story of power, betrayal, and punishment so cruel it blurred the line between devotion and horror. At its heart stands Catherine, a woman who rose from a captured servant to Empress of Russia, a throne drenched in blood and secrets. And somewhere in that ascent came a forbidden bond with her trusted secretary, Willem Mons, a bond that would be severed not only by betrayal, but by a sharp axe and a jar of alcohol that refused to let the dead rest. Tonight, we are peeling back the polished mask of imperial grandeur. We're stepping into a court where love was dangerous, loyalty was punished, and even in death, a ruler's wrath could twist flesh and memory into a weapon. By the end of this story, you'll ask yourself, was this a lover's devotion, or the most grotesque relic of royal vengeance ever kept behind palace doors? The rise of Catherine and her secret world. Before she was empress, Catherine had no throne, no crown, and no name that mattered. Born Marta Skavronskaya, she was a nobody, a child of war in the early 1680s, swept up in bloodshed and raids that ripped families apart. She was captured, passed between masters, surviving on scraps and silence. History barely remembers these years, but they shaped her into a woman who understood one thing above all else. Survival meant obedience, until the day power finally came within reach. She caught the eye of Peter the Great, a man both visionary and tyrant, a Tsar who built an empire with one hand and destroyed it with the other. By the time Marta became Catherine, she was not just his mistress, but the closest thing to stability Peter ever allowed himself. But life at court was not safe. Power in Russia was a double-edged sword. One moment you were in favor, the next you were on your knees, begging for mercy that would never come. This is where the Mons family entered Catherine's life. Anna Mons had been Peter's longtime mistress before Catherine's rise, but it was Willem Mons, Anna's ambitious younger brother, who would entwine his fate with Catherine's in a way no one could have imagined. Willem was charming, cunning, and most dangerously trusted. As Catherine's personal secretary, he handled gifts, messages, and favors that passed through her hands. Every secret of the Empress flowed to him, and with each whispered conversation, his influence grew. Court gossips began to murmur. They said Willem's closeness to Catherine was not just political, that in the hidden chambers of the imperial palace, the line between servant, advisor, and lover blurred. Perhaps they were wrong. Perhaps it was only friendship. But in Peter's Russia, rumors could kill just as easily as treason. And this particular rumor would lead not only to Willem's death, but to a final act of brutality so grotesque that it would haunt Catherine for the rest of her life. Scandal, corruption, and betrayal. By 1724, Willem Mons was no longer just a trusted aide. He had become a shadow power in the Russian court, moving gold, favors, and secrets in a way that made enemies on every side. Nobles whispered that access to Catherine's ear could be bought for the right price, and Willem was the one holding the keys. But the ugliest rumors went further. They said Catherine wasn't just protecting him, she was sharing her bed with him, risking everything under Peter's brutal, all-seeing rule. Peter the Great was a man who mixed genius with savagery. He dragged Russia into modernity with one hand and strangled dissent with the other. His paranoia was legendary, his temper unmatched. When whispers of Willem's growing influence reached him, they were like blood in the water. Whether or not Catherine betrayed him hardly mattered. To Peter, the idea that his wife's loyalty or his empire's gold could be stolen by another man was unforgivable. The accusations came swift and merciless. Willem was charged with corruption, accused of selling government access for bribes, of abusing his power as the Empress's favorite. Yet behind closed doors, the true crime was something unspoken, something Peter could not stand to name. Betrayal of the flesh, betrayal of the Tsar's honor. Once that seed of suspicion took root, Willem's fate was sealed. Arrest came without warning. Soldiers dragged Willem from his home, and his sister Matryona, once one of Catherine's closest companions, was seized and beaten for good measure. Some say Catherine tried to intervene, pleading for his life behind locked doors. Others claim she was silent, frozen in fear of her husband's wrath. No plea could change what was coming. Peter wanted a spectacle, a lesson to all who would dare to cross him, not just politically but personally. The stage was set for a punishment so savage that it would echo through history, a punishment that would not end even after the executioner's blade fell. The arrest and bloody execution. The winter of 1724 wrapped St. Petersburg in ice, but inside the fortress walls, where Willem Mons awaited his fate, the air stank of fear and blood. His arrest had been a spectacle, yet the trial was worse, a mockery of justice where the verdict had already been carved into his bones before the first word was spoken. Peter the Great didn't just want Willem dead, he wanted him broken, stripped of dignity, reduced to nothing but a cautionary tale. Interrogations lasted for days. Some say the Tsar himself oversaw them, demanding confessions through beatings, iron clamps, and the slow tightening of ropes around Willem's limbs. Every accusation of bribery was met with torture until the answers Peter wanted were forced from swollen lips. Whether Willem was truly guilty mattered little. In Peter's empire, guilt was whatever the Tsar said it was. Finally, the day came. Willem Mons was dragged into the cold square where a crowd had gathered, drawn by the promise of royal blood being spilled. His sister, Matryona, bruised and beaten, was forced to watch. Soldiers jeered as they tied Willem to the execution block. Witnesses later claimed he remained eerily calm, resigned to the fate that awaited him. The axe came down in one clean stroke, but death did not grant mercy. Blood sprayed across the frozen ground, steam rising in the bitter air as the body slumped lifeless. The crowd fell silent, but Peter wasn't finished. He had Willem's severed head lifted high for all to see, a grim trophy meant to feed fear straight into the hearts of his court. Execution was not the end of Willem Mons. It was the beginning of his second life, as an object of royal vengeance, a symbol Peter would use to humiliate Catherine in a way more grotesque than anyone could imagine. For this head would not be buried. It would be preserved, pickled, and placed where Catherine could never escape it. The preserved head. The axe had done its work, but Peter the Great wasn't satisfied with simple death. Willem Mons had dared to tarnish the Tsar's honor, to stain the imperial household with whispers of betrayal. A clean execution would not erase that shame. It needed something far more grotesque, a punishment that would linger long after the blood froze on the scaffold. Witnesses claimed that after Willem's head was severed, Peter ordered it seized before burial rites could begin. Soldiers carried it not to a grave, but to the imperial workshops, where surgeons and apothecaries began a chilling task, preserving the head of a traitor. It was washed, drained, and lowered into a glass jar filled with strong alcohol. The skin took on a pallid yellowish hue, the hair matted and slick against the jar walls, the eyes clouded like fogged glass marbles. The gruesome relic looked less like a man and more like a ghastly trophy meant to haunt whoever laid eyes on it, and Peter knew exactly where he wanted that trophy displayed. That night, the jar was placed in Catherine's private chambers. Some say Peter delivered it himself, setting it on a table beside her bed, the flickering candlelight making the preserved face seem alive again, floating in its prison of liquid. According to dark legend, Peter forced her to stare at it night after night, a reminder of where misplaced affection or betrayal would lead. But as the weeks turned to months, the story took on an even stranger twist. Court whispers claimed that Catherine didn't send the head away. Whether out of grief, guilt, or some twisted devotion, she kept it near her even after Peter's death. Servants muttered that the jar never left her private rooms, that the Empress sometimes sat in silence beside it, fingers resting on the cold glass as if touching Willem one last time. Pact, rumor, or a nightmare designed to terrify all who served near the throne? Historians debate the truth, but one thing is certain. This was no ordinary love story. It had become something darker, a connection that neither death nor an axe nor the Tsar himself could sever. And this would not be the final chapter of the severed head's journey. Long after both Peter and Catherine were gone, the jar and its gruesome contents would resurface to horrify future rulers of Russia. Catherine the Empress and her grim keepsake. In 1725, just months after Willem's bloody end, Peter the Great himself was gone, struck down by illness, leaving Russia without its brutal architect. Amidst the chaos of succession, Catherine ascended the throne as Empress of all Russia. The woman who had once been a servant was now ruler of the empire, wielding power over armies, nobles, and the Orthodox Church. But even as she donned the imperial crown, the shadow of Willem Mons lingered in her chambers. Whispers swirled through court corridors that the glass jar remained on her bedside table, a silent witness to power bought with blood. Some said Catherine ordered it kept close not from fear, but from twisted loyalty, a desperate attempt to hold on to the one man who had truly been hers in a world where everything was bought or stolen. Others believed it was Peter's final act of cruelty, a humiliation so deep that even as Empress, Catherine dared not defy it. Servants claimed that in the still hours of night they saw her seated by the jar, the candlelight casting her face and Willem's lifeless features in the same flickering glow. They said she whispered to it, confided in it, touched the cold glass like a widow reaching for a ghost. Whether grief, guilt, or some darker devotion drove her, the legend of the Empress who slept beside a severed head took root and refused to die. What made this story even more disturbing was Catherine's quiet power play after Peter's death. She restored Willem's sister Matriona to favor at court, promoting her as if to atone for the blood spilled by her husband. It was as if Catherine was rewriting the ending of Willem's tragedy in secret, even as the grisly relic remained locked in her private world. No official chronicle records this. Historians cannot prove it, but every retelling from palace staff to foreign visitors carried the same eerie detail. The jar never left her chambers until Catherine herself was gone. And the nightmare didn't end there. The severed head would outlive the Empress, traveling through Russian history like a cursed artifact destined to horrify rulers decades later. The head's final journey. Catherine's reign was brief, barely 2 years on the throne before death claimed her in 1727. But her legend didn't die with her. According to whispers in the Russian court, the jar containing Willem Mons's severed head remained sealed within the palace, an object too macabre to destroy and too dangerous to display. Servants feared it, believing it cursed. They claimed that any who touched the jar without permission soon met strange misfortunes, as though the head carried Willem's thirst for vengeance into the afterlife. Decades passed. Russia changed hands, new rulers rose and fell, but the gruesome relic endured. Eventually, during the reign of Catherine the Great, the jar was allegedly discovered among Peter the Great's notorious Kunstkamera, his cabinet of curiosities filled with preserved fetuses, malformed animals, and other grotesque wonders of science and punishment. Yet even in that house of horrors, a human head floating in spirits had no label, no explanation, only a dark story whispered behind closed doors. Some accounts claim Catherine the Great, disturbed by the artifact's presence, ordered it buried secretly, denying the gruesome legend any further fuel. Others insist it was quietly hidden deeper within the museum, locked away from prying eyes, yet never truly gone. What cannot be denied is how the story outlived both the lovers and the tyrant who separated them. Foreign ambassadors and chroniclers recorded variations of the tale, each one painting the same ghastly picture. A woman, an empress, haunted by the decapitated head of a man who might have been her one true love. Whether it was grief, devotion, or a trophy of Peter's cruelty, no one could agree, but no one could forget it either. Centuries later, the tale still circulates in hushed tones, a legend steeped in rot and betrayal, of a love story dismembered yet unburied. The final journey of Willem Mons's head may have ended in earth or alcohol, but its memory still floats like a spectre over Russia's imperial past. Rumors, speculation, and lingering darkness. The story of Catherine and the severed head has survived for 3 centuries, passed from mouth to ear, palace to tavern, historian to scandalmonger. But like any tale too disturbing to face directly, it lives somewhere between truth and nightmare. Did Catherine really keep Willem Mons's head beside her bed for years? Or is this just a grotesque invention? A punishment stretched into myth by a court obsessed with betrayal? Official Russian records are silent on the matter. No imperial decree mentions the jar. No priest wrote of such a relic being displayed. Yet the legend endures because too many fragments of truth refuse to vanish. We know Willem Mons existed. We know Peter had him executed. And we know Peter had a cruel fascination with preserving the dead. He famously ordered other heads pickled after executions, displayed them to terrorize enemies, even collected malformed fetuses and human remains for his own cabinet of curiosities. To Peter, the human body, even in death, was just another tool of power and fear. So is it really so hard to believe that Catherine's rumored lover met the same fate, that his head was preserved as a trophy of Peter's wrath, that an empress surrounded by political vipers and ghosts of her past would keep that relic as a reminder of love lost, guilt unburied, or perhaps a warning of how fragile power truly was? Historians debate the details, but the whispers persist because they feel true to the brutality of the time and the people who ruled it. In a palace where executions were theater and betrayal was currency, the idea of a queen haunted by a severed head doesn't sound impossible. It sounds inevitable. And even today, the legend clings to the Russian court like a bloodstain that will not wash out, leaving a single chilling question echoing through history. What kind of love survives the axe? And why would someone choose to keep its face staring back at them forever? The final haunting conclusion. History likes to dress itself in gold and silk, to pretend that kings and queens lived grandly, their lives written like fairy tales. But behind the jeweled crowns and glittering thrones lies a truth that is far uglier, more human, and far more grotesque than the storytellers dare admit. Catherine I of Russia rose from obscurity to rule an empire. Yet even at the height of her power, she could not escape the cruelty of the man who made her empress, nor the brutality of the world that forged her. The tale of Willem Mons and his severed head preserved in alcohol, whether fully true or twisted by rumor, is not just a gruesome love story. It is a window into the psychology of power, where love could be weaponized, betrayal punished beyond the grave, and grief forced to rot in a glass jar beside the bed of an empress. Some say Catherine kept the head out of love, others say fear, and some believe it was Peter's final command she dared not disobey, even after he was gone. Whatever the truth, the image remains burned into history's darker corners, a silent face, eyes clouded and lifeless, floating in yellow spirits while candles flicker through the night. A constant reminder that in the courts of kings and czars, love and cruelty were often the same thing. Centuries later, the jar is gone, buried, hidden or lost to time, but its story endures, a testament to a world where even death was not an escape, where vengeance was bottled, preserved, and forced upon the living. And so we are left with one chilling thought. If power demanded you hold on to the thing you loved most, no matter how grotesque, no matter how broken, what would you keep beside your bed when all else was taken from you? History hides its darkest relics in plain sight. If you want more, grotesque courts, cursed crowns, and the secrets they tried to bury, subscribe to Twisted Facts Vault right now. Hit the bell so you don't miss the next sealed file. And answer this: love or fear? Which one kept that jar in her room?